is that while the world is changing and poses new challenges, these challenges aren't beyond our control. The truth is, working families are struggling today in large measure because of the failure of leadership and the failure of imagination in Washington. It's a Washington where George Bush hands out billions of dollars in tax cuts year after year to the biggest corporations and the wealthiest few who don't need them and weren't even asking for them. Tax breaks that are mortgaging our children's future on a mountain of debt. It's a Washington where decades of lopsided trade deals like NAFTA and China have put Wall Street ahead of Main Street and cost us millions of jobs, including more than 40,000 jobs here in Pennsylvania. A Washington where the right to organize and unionize has come under assault for the last 8 years. It's a Washington where too many ignored the warning signs and voted for a war in Iraq that should have never been authorized and should have never been waged. A war that is costing us thousands of precious lives, but also hundreds of billions of dollars. $12 billion a month. Money that could have been used to rebuild crumbling schools and bridges, roads and buildings that could have been invested in job training and child care and making health care more affordable and putting college within reach for so many of our young people. I realize that politicians come before you every election and they say that they're going to change all this. They lay out big plans and hold events just like this one because it's popular to do and it's easy to make promises in the heat of a campaign, but all too often everyone goes back to Washington and nothing changes. It's business as usual because the lobbyists write another check or because politicians spend time worrying about how they'll win the next election instead of why they should win the next election. Because they're focused on who's up and who's down instead of who matters. The worker who's lost his pension or the family that's had to put up a for sale sign because they're at the risk of foreclosure. The young woman who gets 3 hours sleep a night because she's going to school and working the night shift and still can't afford all the health care that she needs for her family. These are the Americans that need real change, the kind of change that's more than just switching political parties in the White House. They need change in our politics. They need leadership that can end the division in Washington so we can stop just talking about our challenges and start solving them. Who doesn't defend lobbyists as part of the system, but sees them as part of a problem. Who actually says what he or she means and means what he or she says, and who will be the voice for middle class and working Americans every day for the next 4 years. And I intend to be that president. I'll be the president who strengthens our middle class by learning from what's happened in places like Fairless Hills. When U.S. Steel was at its peak here in the 1970s, there were nearly 10,000 people working at this facility. As you know all too well, U.S. Steel closed down most of its operations here in the years that followed. And by the early 1990s, there were less than 100 people working. But thanks to the leadership of people like Congressman Murphy and companies like Gamesa and the steel workers who fought to make sure that the jobs here pay a good wage, Fairless Hills is doing what Americans have always done in times of challenge and uncertainty. You're reclaiming your own future. And you're turning Bucks County into a center of green jobs in America. And these kinds of jobs will only become more important in the coming years because green jobs are the jobs of the future. Not just because they pay well and can't be outsourced, and not just because they help strengthen our economy and lift up our middle class, but because they help us reduce our dependence on foreign oil and may just save this planet for our children. We've been talking about this for decades, but we can't afford any more empty talk. And that's why, as president, I will invest $150 billion over 10 years in establishing a green energy sector that will create up to 5 million new jobs, including jobs here in Pennsylvania. I'll pass a law that says 25% of our electricity has to come from renewable energy sources by the year 2025. Which will spur the development of new technologies and could create hundreds of thousands of new jobs on its own. I'll also invest in clean energies like wind and solar and biodiesel and the technologies to make clean coal. And we'll provide funding to help manufacturers convert green technology and help workers learn the skills they need for these jobs. But understand, if we're truly to make a difference in the lives of working families, we're going to need to make a broader investment in the middle class as well. And that's exactly what I intend to do as President of the United States. I want to be very clear. Today we are part of a global economy in which we need to compete and we need to win. Trade is important as part of that economy, and we can't shrink from that challenge. But I'm going to make sure that our trade deals have strong labor and environmental protections to help keep jobs here in Pennsylvania. I intend to pass what I call the Patriot Employer Act that I've been fighting for since I ran for the Senate. We are going to take away tax breaks for companies that are shipping jobs overseas and invest those tax breaks in companies that are investing right here in the United States of America. Companies that create good jobs with good wages here in the United States. I also want to make sure that we're providing tax breaks to workers and not just the wealthy few. So we're going to put $1,000 per family in tax cuts for working families and struggling homeowners, and I'll eliminate the income tax for seniors who are bringing in less than $50,000 a year because they are already struggling and they need the help.